Welcome back, everybody, to the Pigskin Blink, your daily or almost daily look at fantasy football, the NFL, sits, starts, studs, duds, previews, reviews, and everything else in the world of fantasy football to help make your fantasy football team sizzle. Let's get it started with all the action from Sunday as well as last night's NFL game. Let's get it started with the St. Louis Rams going down to the Chicago Bears 23-6. Bradford 18 of 35, 152, no touchdowns. Really bad numbers. Jackson on the ground, 11 carries for 29 yards. And Amendola, the only ray of sunshine in that game, and still pretty bad, with 6 points, finishing on the week in standard scoring, 5 receptions, 66 yards. Cutler on the other side of the ball, I thought he was going to be one of those ones earlier in the week that, he could show some fantasy potential. And as the week went on, I was kind of on the fence with him, and he showed why I call him Satan. 17 of 31, 183, no touchdowns. Bush on the ground, 18 carries, 55 yards, 1 touchdown. And Brandon Marshall finally having a pretty good game, 5 receptions, 71 yards. The Buffalo Bills without Spiller come into Cleveland and down them, 24-14. Fitzpatrick, pretty good fantasy year so far, 22 of 35, 208, 3 touchdowns. Choice on the ground in Spiller's stead, 20 carries, 91 yards. And Johnson in the air, the leading receiver for the Bills, 7 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. Whedon getting it done still. Not a solid starting play, but definitely somebody to watch out for, have on the bench. 27 of 43, 237, and 1 touchdown. Richardson on the ground. Not a lot of yardage, 12 carries for 27, but 1 touchdown. 6 points is 6 points, isn't it? Cameron, the leading receiver for the Cleveland Browns, 5 receptions for 45 yards in Dallas, hosting the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers didn't win. 16-10 as Dallas beats them at home. Romo in the air, 25-39, 283, no touchdowns. Murray on the ground, 18 carries, 38 yards, and a big touchdown in Austin, 5 receptions, 107, the leading receiver for Dallas, but no touchdowns. Tampa Bay in the air with Freeman, 10 of 28, which is horrible numbers. 110 yards, 1 touchdown. As for rushing, Martin on the ground, 19 carries, 53 yards. And Williams, the leading receiver, and he shouldn't be proud of this, 2 receptions for only 33 yards. A huge shootout in Tennessee, as I thought it might finally be, as the Titans beat out the Lions, 44-41 in overtime off of a field goal. Detroit, Stafford, 33 of 42, decent. 278, decent. Only 1 touchdown, not so much. Johnson, the leading receiver in the air, 10 receptions, 164, 1 touchdown. LaShore, if you picked him up, like everybody was saying that you should, 26 carries, 100 yards, and 1 touchdown. Locker for Tennessee, 29 of 42, 378, 2 touchdowns. Really good numbers. He also was the leading rusher for the Titans, 4 carries, 35 yards. Leading receiver, Nate Washington, finished the day, 3 receptions for 112 and 1 touchdown for the Tennessee Titans. Jacksonville Jaguars come into Indianapolis Colts and beat them 22-17. Gabbert on the day, 10 for 21, 155, 1 touchdown. Maurice Jones-Drew, big day, 28 carries, 177, and 1 touchdown in shorts. The leading receiver off of only 1 reception, 80 yards and 1 touchdown. On the other side of the ball, Indianapolis Colts and Luck definitely aren't luck. I think that it's just because they give him enough times to throw, and he's putting up the points over and over again. 22 of 46, which really isn't a great percentage for completion rate. 313, 2 touchdowns. That is as far as fantasy points go. Donald Brown on the ground, the leading rusher for the Colts, 18 carries, 62 yards, and in the air, Hilton, leading receiver for the Colts, 4 receptions, 113, and a touchdown. The Jets beat out the Miami Dolphins 23-20 in overtime. Sanchez, 21 for 45, 306, and 1 touchdown. Powell, the leading rusher for the Jets, 10 carries, 45 yards. And Santonio Holmes, the leading receiver for the Jets, 9 receptions for 147. Really good day. Tannehill on the other side of the ball, 16 of 36, 196, no touchdowns. Thomas coming in for Bush, 19 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Good day. And Devone Bess, 5 receptions, 86 yards, and no touchdowns. San Francisco 49ers look to become 3-0 at the end of this week as they come into Minnesota. However, Minnesota had other plans as they beat them out 24 to 13. Alex Smith, 24 of 35, decent passing ratio. 200 yards, 1 touchdown, not so good fantasy-wise. Frank Gore on the ground, 12 carries, 63 yards, no touchdowns. And Manningham, leading receiver for the 49ers, 5 receptions, 56 yards, no touchdowns. For Minnesota, Ponder putting up fantasy points week in and week out, 21 of 35, 198, 2 touchdowns. AP, Adrian Peterson on the ground, 25 carries, 86 yards and no touchdowns. And Percy Harvin having good weeks, 9 receptions, 89 yards and no touchdowns, which needs to start getting bumped up before he gets bumped down in status. Right now, he's a lot of people's number 1 receiver, higher number 2. If this keeps going up, he's probably going to be looking at flex play kind of position because yardage doesn't put you into the playoffs at all. So fantasy owners, keep your eyes out on that. The Chiefs beat out the powerhouse that is the Saints, or at least was last year, as the Saints go down to Kansas City, 24-27 in overtime. The Saints finishing the week 0-3 and 0-2 at home. Castle on the day, 26 of 44, 248, and no touchdowns. I thought he'd have a better day than this. Jamal Charles, the big surprise, however, 33 carries usually leads to 200-plus yards, which he had, 233 and 1 touchdown. Bo, leading receiver for Kansas City, 7 receptions, 79 yards, and no touchdowns. Breeze, through these losses, still putting out pretty decent fantasy numbers, 240 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns. Sproles, leading rusher on the ground, 7 carries, 62 yards. And Lance Moore, leading receiver for New Orleans, putting together a pretty good game, 4 receptions, 70 yards, and 1 touchdown. Cincinnati Bengals enter Washington and grab the win, 38-31. Andy Dalton, 19 of 27, 328, 3 touchdowns, really good numbers. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, the law firm, 17 carries, 38 yards, and 1 touchdown. And A.J. Green finishes the day with 9 receptions for 183, and 1 touchdown. RG3 through this season has been, fantasy-wise, week in and week out, a pretty solid freaking play. Finishes the day in the air, 21 of 34, 221, and 1 touchdown on the ground. He's the leading rusher for Washington, 12 carries, 85 yards, and 1 touchdown. And Fred Davis finishes the day as the leading receiver for Washington, 7 receptions for 90 yards and no touchdowns. The Philadelphia Eagles were hoping and praying for a win as they entered Arizona, but there was a bigger bird. I don't have any more jokes for that. As the Cardinals beat out the Eagles 27-6. Michael Vick finishing the day 17 of 37 for 217, no touchdowns. McCoy on the ground, 13 carries, 70 yards. And Demaryius Johnson, the leading receiver for the Eagles, 5 receptions for 84 yards, pretty decent. Kevin Kolb finishing the day for the Arizona Cardinals, 17 of 24. 222 and 2 touchdowns, pretty decent numbers. Ryan Williams, leading rusher for Arizona, 13 carries, 83 yards. And Larry Fitzgerald, I thought he'd have a bad day, but he didn't. He put together a pretty good one. 9 receptions, 114 yards, and a touchdown. Another birdie news, the Falcons come into the San Diego Chargers Stadium and rip them a new one, 27-3 the final score. Matty Ice, 30 of 40. For 275 and 3 touchdowns. Michael Turner on the ground, 14 carries for 80 yards and 1 touchdown. And Tony Gonzalez, the aged one, 9 receptions for 91 yards and 1 touchdown as he finishes the top receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. On the other side of the ball, Phillip Rivers, I thought he'd have a much more solid day than this. It was just bad. 21 of 38 for 173, no touches. Jackie Battle, the leading rusher for the Chargers, on 3 carries for 55 yards, and Floyd 3 receptions for 52 yards. The Broncos come into Denver and beat old rival, old foe Peyton Manning's Broncos 31-25. Matt Schaub, 17 of 30, 290 with 4 big touchdowns. Foster on the ground, 25 carries for 105 yards. And Kevin Walter, the leading receiver for the Houston Texans, 3 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown for Denver. Peyton Manning still putting up pretty solid numbers, but, when you have 50-plus attempts, you're going to do that. 26 completions off of 52 throws, 330 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Willis McGahee, the leading rusher for the Denver Broncos, 12 carries for 36 yards. And Eric Decker, who I didn't think would have a good day. Then I did, then I didn't. I was just kind of sitting on the fence with him. 8 receptions for 136 yards and no touchdowns. At 13 points in standard scoring is pretty decent. The Steelers, as I shake my head, close my eyes, and weep a little bit, lose to the Oakland Raiders 31-34. 4 late in the game. Big Ben, a really decent day, but once again, just like Manning, if you have about 50 attempts, you're going to get a lot of yardage. 36 of 49, 384 with 4 touchdowns. Isaac Redman, the leading rusher for Pitt in a non-rushing kind of day for Pitt. 9 carries for 27 yards. And Mike Wallace finishing the day at receptions for 123 and 1 touchdown. On the other side of the ball, Carson Palmer, a really good fantasy and waiver wire pickup for this week. 24-34, 209, 3 touchdowns. Darren McFadden, I didn't think he'd have this kind of a day, but he did. 18 carries, 113, and 1 touchdown. And Brandon Myers keeps on doing it. Pick him up if you can. 4 receptions for 55 yards, no touchdowns. His points will go up higher and higher and higher. That yardage will as the weeks go on. Believe you me. The Patriots and the Ravens on, a late game kind of, where I'm expecting even more fines or some other rules to be written up, especially after what Belichick did. The Ravens hold on at home to beat out the Patriots 31 of 30 and get a little bit of revenge for last year's AFC game. Brady on the day, 28 for 41, 335 and 1 touchdown. Ridley, 13 carries for 37 yards. And Walker finishes the day as a top receiver for the New England Patriots. 8 receptions for 142. Flacco in the air, actually damn consistent, 28 of 39. For 382 and 3 touchdowns. Rice on the ground does what Rice does on the ground. 20 carries for 101 and 1 touchdown. And Torrey Smith with a heavy, heavy heart having a career day as, this week he lays his brother to rest. 6 receptions for 127 and 2 big, big touchdowns. In last night's horrible action. Can we even call this the NFL anymore? Like, shouldn't this be like the NFL WWE flag football classic or some other crap? Because that was a great game up to the last 2 minutes in what would become, I don't even know. I'm at a loss for words. The Seattle Seahawks beat the Packers at home 14-12. Unless you actually watch what happened, and then the Seahawks lost to the Packers 12-7. Thank you, Mr. Insurance Salesman, pretending to be a referee. Aaron Rodgers on the day, 26-39, 223, no touchdowns. Benson gets it done on the ground, 17 carries, 45 yards, 1 touchdown. And Jermichael Finley, the leading receiver for the Packers, 4 receptions for 60 yards. In the air, the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson, 10 of 21, 130 for 2 touchdowns. Marshawn Lynch, Mr. Skittle Man, 25 carries for only 98 yards and no touchdowns. And Golden Tate was the golden boy as the officials found him. 3 receptions for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, about this game and the rest of the games, the only thing that I can really say about it is there's no clear-cut strategy that you can use, that anybody can use as a fantasy football owner. Right now the refs are interfering with the NFL games. They're interfering with fantasy football, and, albeit fantasy football doesn't generate the same amount of income as the NFL, which is about $5 billion a year, whatever the hell it is. But the simple fact of the matter is right now, the contracts and the talks with them, with the referees, involve their pensions. And that's only about $2 to $3 million. And fantasy football generates pretty close in the neighborhood of 100 million plus per year. So you have a lot of things going on. You have players that are playing and getting injured. You have scores that are shifting and going the wrong way. There's a lot of wins that were given that weren't really wins. There were a lot of penalties that were never called. There were a lot of times, one half, you could have a ref call everything straight down the board, and then the very next half they call nothing at all. And this has got to stop. Like I said, though, as fantasy football owners, there's no strategy for this. The most that you can do is if you run a friendly league, before the year started, hopefully the owner made it clear to everybody, if it's a friends and family league, or even if it's a work league or something like that, that if a vote comes down to alter a score when it's pretty evident that something's going on, then you should do it. And I would take, I would take the opportunity to do it, especially if some of these scores are that close. Tate getting 2 touchdowns was not Tate getting 2 touchdowns. He got 1. And these refs, these insurance salesmen, and these part-time amateur fishermen, and these weekend lawnmower specialists, they need to go. The NFL, Goodell, needs to get up off their asses, put together a package, and get it done as soon as possible before another week goes by where this amount of money and these amount of fans become more and more disgruntled, and it takes down the play. It was so bad that at the beginning of the season, a lot of players said that, especially the defensive players, they said that what they did was they practiced being held as they blitzed. They practiced being held as they were running their routes because they knew that some of the stuff wouldn't get called at all. And sure enough, in the games that I've been watching, especially this last week, there was a ridiculous amount of no calls, a ridiculous amount of wrong calls, and it's just got to stop. That is it for me for the recap of this weekend's games, including last night's action. I'll be nice. You can check out this broadcast as well as every other broadcast of the Daily Pigskin Blink at the Fantasy Football Toolkit. That's right. The Fantasy Football Toolkit is, or will be, a weekly podcast discussing all facets of fantasy football, from managing your league the whole way up to actually what players to start, sit, get rid of, or pick up off the waiver wire. And you can check that out at fantasyfootballtoolkit.com. You can also check out this broadcast at 360 Sports Network for the best in local, regional, national, amateur, pro, every sport under the sun, MLB, NFL, NHL, NBA, as well as Indy, Olympics, college football, college baseball, every single sport under the sun, because this is a site built for the fans, by the fans. You can check them out at 360 Sports Network, and that's at 360sportsnetwork.com. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything under the sun that you want to send me and have me answer, you can send that over to Lost Cause at fantasyfootballtoolkit.com. That's it for me, everybody. Enjoy your lovely, lovely Tuesday.